We are live.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone. Oh, my hand is so big. Look, sorry. Hello, welcome to What If You Are the Symphony? And today our guest is Anthony Mattis. So we are going to dive in and see what he knows about us all being the symphony. And Anthony Mattis has been facilitating the symphony for many, many years now, and also is facilitating symphony classes at this point called Opening of the Symphony. So I would say that he is one of the pioneers that is moving this forward in the world and also developing it into what it can become. And that said, do you get that you could talk about what the symphony is for you?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. That was amazing. I'd never considered myself as a pioneer. It's like to me, our dear friend Dr. Dane here is the pioneer. He was the Lone Ranger there for a while when he started this whole journey, and we get to all be part of this amazing thing that he created. I'm just glad to contribute, and you've been such a huge contribution as well, and my own personal journey, and I know you have been for Dane as well, and all of Access Consciousness. So thank you so much. But yeah, so one of the gifts that I got to observe the very first time I oversaw the 4-day Symphony of Possibilities class in Zagreb, Croatia, was because back in the past I'd be out there with everybody else, participating with the symphony energies, but when you're up there as a facilitator observing everyone, as you now have been able to observe in the introduction of the symphony classes, how everyone is an energetic and acoustical contribution to the whole. And it's an observable thing. And I remember that day, that very first class that I was up there, and I was like, oh, and I could literally, I want to say see, but it's like I did see something, like with my eyes, right? And it was so magical to me, because it was like, even like the people who were beginners, so to speak, there really aren't any beginners, because what they were creating when they were going around working with the person, not just their bodies, but their beings, and interacting with everyone else, I was able to see this wave of energetic and acoustical contribution. And I was like, oh my God. But at the same time, I can see where they were functioning from. Like, a lot of them were in their heads, like, I'm not doing it right. I've never done this before. I don't even know if this stuff is hocus pocus. And I'm seeing it. I'm like, oh my God, they are contributing so much beyond what they're even able to acknowledge right now. And that's part of the newness of it. I went through that. I know you went through that. And over time, what happens is you start to get these energetic downloads and awarenesses as you're playing with these energies. And that starts to become a knowing in your world. But yeah, that all I can say is, it doesn't matter if you're in the lowest part or time in your life. It doesn't matter what you've ever been through. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank or little money. You are an energetic and acoustical contribution to everything, to all of existence, if you will, all of consciousness.
Well, you mentioned the introducing the symphony classes, which are these evening classes that you can actually find all over the world. And we started to facilitate those this year. So I would also like, because not only do the people begin their journey, when they start doing their first symphony session and then develop, but the symphony itself has developed. So when it started many years ago, when we started to facilitate those classes, the energy that you're describing now in the room was very different. And one of the most fascinating parts for me is how somebody can come into a symphony, introducing the symphony class, and they can start playing with these energies. And as you say, that acoustic wave, the energies of the universe or consciousness or whatever we call them, they start moving. And it wasn't really always like that. So could you describe what actually has occurred with the symphony energy from Dane facilitating all these symphony classes? Like what has happened with it in the world?
Well, yeah, I mean, a while ago, I don't remember when it was, but it's like, that saying where two or more are gathered, you're able to sort of actualize things. And so I think that consistent, the demand and commitment, the consistency, the commitment and demand for consciousness and playing with these energies, we as beings have evolved. And even the new people who are in the classes now, even though they weren't there 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, it doesn't matter, because the impact that this work has is outside of the room in which we're playing with these energies. It goes out infinitely. And so it this is just the way I see it, okay?
Mhm.
But like in those energies, as they go out, they touch the people who are looking for this sort of thing and who are ready. But it
Mm.
took the time, like in this reality, it did take the time to connect. And that's why people are almost ready. They're hungry for this sort of thing. And so whatever we did, whatever Dane started, 20 something years ago, right? And then creating the energetic synthesis of being class, as we call it, ESB, and then creating the workshops, the SOP, the Symphony of Possibilities, where he started to teach people how to access these energies and be with these energies. All these years and all the different people who came and have gone have been
Mm.
a contribution to the future and what is actually showing up right now. And God only knows, like 10 years from now, Kat, right? I mean, like, what is it going to look like 10 years from now? And I'm really excited to be a part of this journey. And so I think it's just the level of commitment, the demand, and the consistency that we all together contributed to this whole thing.
So, can everyone play with a symphony? And what makes it easier for some people and harder for other people?
Well, doubt makes it harder. We just tend to get in our way. And
Mm.
as you learn about distractor implants and access consciousness. For those of you who may have not even heard of what a distractor implant is, but they're just basically the things in our lives that keep us from being all of who we are and what we are. And so they're sort of distractions. And they get you to focus on the things that aren't real, like, fear and blame and shame and regret and guilt and anger, rage, so on. There's a bunch of them. And
Mm.
so, but look, I was functioning from all those distractor implants when I fell into all of this. And even with that, you can still be a miracle. And so, yeah, because everybody has their own unique energies. Everyone has their own unique energetic blueprint, so to speak, energetic frequency, acoustical frequency that only you have. And
Mm.
so that in and of itself is the contribution. Your very being, okay, and as you grow and develop and choose to maybe um, be in that space of vulnerability and use these tools and allow the tools to contribute to you, you start to become stronger and actually more potent. And then you start to develop a knowing along the way that no one can ever take away from you. And then that you start to take into your sessions, which is
Mm.
really cool. And so your confidence starts to, as we would just say, sort of in everyday terms, your confidence starts to grow. But again, I didn't have any confidence when I first started. To me, it was just a class I needed to do because it was a prerequisite to become a certified facilitator. I was like, I don't know about this energy work. I always loved it. I always saw other people do it, but I was like, who am I? But then when I
Mm.
started to learn, when Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, is like, dude, it's your being. It's your being. And I didn't really know what that meant. I'm like, what do you mean? Because I'm a nice guy? Because you feel sorry for me? I was a widower at the time, raising 3 kids by myself. And I thought maybe he felt sorry for me. I'm like, you know what I mean? And so he's like, no, it's your being. And that's exactly what the whole of Access is about, is
Mm.
to empower you to know what you know and to get you to access your very being. And your very being is its own unique vibration, frequency, whatever you want to call it, that no one else has. And that becomes a contribution for others.
Well, it's interesting because in the beginning you were saying like how people can go in and just become part of the symphony and start contributing. So what is it actually that you learn or what you step into when you continue to explore the symphony of possibilities, when you come to more classes, when you become a practitioner, which you become like after the opening of the symphony or the symphony of possibilities, what are you gaining or what are you embracing by going deeper?
More of you. I mean, I don't want to be all
Mm.
esoteric, but you're embracing more of you and embracing more of everything else around you. And so that you're no longer tossed and turned by the things outside of you, that you actually start to perceive the
Mm,
consciousness in all things, not only within you, but things outside of you. And then there becomes this sense of communion with all things, the good, the bad, and the ugly of yourself and everyone else. So you start to learn how to use the things around you sort of like to your advantage, to receive their contribution or its contribution, and then
mm,
you can therefore use that to be the contribution for others. So it's just growth. It's just you get to access more of your very being. And to me, I think of it as like the times where people would work on me throughout the years, and Dane in particularly, like it was like taking like an energetic machete and slicing through all my limitations. And then after the session, it's like you have this like sense of like communion. You just want to like give yourself a hug. You know what I mean? It's like, I love me. You know, and I'm not trying to be all esoteric or metaphysical or anything like that, but it's like, wait, what happened to all those problems that I thought were problems that I've made significant for the last 30 years? It's like, it's not even findable right now, because right now, this space that I'm in right now is like, I feel like anything is possible. Like anything is truly possible beyond my stories, beyond my suffering, beyond all of that. And then you start to function from that space, and
mhm.
you get to start creating the life that you desire for once.
And, even from when we started to chat here, the energy is going more and more and more. So even this conversation is becoming a symphony wave in itself.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, you see how like erect I'm getting as I'm sitting
Yeah.
in, I feel like a little kid in the candy store, because it's exciting.
Hmm.
You know,
And I
it's
noticed in the comments they're saying, "Thank you, I needed this today." And my sense is it's not the exact words or what we're saying, it's the energy of what we're being.
exactly. And because, like you create a space that allows others to be who they are without
Mm,
judgment. And that's an invitation. And that's exactly what we do. But you be that all the time. But
mm,
that's what we be when we're doing sessions with people. So
mm.
they can start to access the energies of who they are and actually feel safe to do it without having to judge themselves or to hold themselves back from reaching for that thing. You know what I mean? Whatever it is. And it's not a thing. It's infinite space, truly. And we talk about this infinite space of possibilities, or the sea of possibilities. And I know it sounds all very woo-woo, but it's not. It's a very, very real occurrence. And right now we're just being that energy. We're not wiggling our fingers. We're actually having a conversation. And like as you said, the wave is already occurring and people are perceiving it already.
So, is there any area of your life where you're not using the symphony of possibilities, or where you're noticing that you're avoiding being it?
Yeah. When I do conclusion, when if sometimes with my kids, I'll tell you what, if you want to really be humbled in this journey of consciousness, it's like really, you could test yourself the way you are with your family.
Mm, that is so true. Yes.
It's like, oh my goodness. It's like sometimes it all goes out the window momentarily. It's like, okay, wait a minute. So, I got called out on that not too long ago. I'm like, yeah, I do conclusions, because it's really easy when you think you've finally gotten something,
Mm,
or when you've decided that you're right about a certain way. And then especially when you approach your children with it, right? Because most parents want the best for the children, and as I do, but sometimes we do it from a place of control and
mm,
fear. Like we don't want them to be as messed up as us, right? So we have all these conclusions about what they need to choose, as opposed to just letting them choose and letting them get the consciousness or the awareness themselves. So I would say there's a lot of times with my family, my
mm.
children in particularly, and my mother. I'm gonna throw my mother in there because she's a tough cookie. There's always one person that really will get you. But those are the areas where I seem to sort of like not be that space.
Mm.
And I'm like, wow. I'm like, I got some work to do.
What do you do? Like, what do you do when you notice, like, it takes a while. Sometimes, it takes a while before we actually even notice and acknowledge that, okay, I'm not being mean right now, not being actually the space that I could be. What tool do you use? How do you
I'm
find your way?
sorry, I fucked up. What can I do
Yes.
for the damage done? I'm sorry, Daddy
Mm,
was an asshole. So I apologize, and
mm,
I promise I wasn't coming from a bad place, but it was a place of control, from a space of control, and I apologize for that. And so and then we look at whatever the scenario was again together, and then as Gary says, you got to put your facilitator hat on sometimes, and not
mm.
treat my kids like they're still 8 years old, because they're not
And
anymore.
it's beautiful too, because somehow with that saying, "Hey, I was wrong. What can I do to make up for the damage done?" It's like you reset, and then you get to start again and
Yeah,
see where can you take it now. And I get you actually have to mean that. What
yeah,
can I
I
do?
do. I
Yeah.
do, because for me, like especially with my children, there's nothing more than I've ever wanted is just to have a close, intimate relationship with them,
Mm,
which I've always had. But the transition of child to teenagehood, and then teenagehood to young adulthood, that hasn't been the easiest transition for me as a parent, because it's like there's a part of me that's still frozen in time, because we've had a
mm,
lot of tragedy, and so I'm like, they're not 8, 10, and 12 anymore, or
mm,
5, 10, and it's like, wow. And I have to wake up. It's weird. It seems like common sense, but it wasn't. And so I really needed to take a step back, and like my role has changed. It's not the same role. I don't
mm,
need to parent them the way that I did then. It's different. And so I needed a lot of facilitation with regards to that, and the willingness to be wrong has gone a really long way, and to
mm,
be vulnerable.
mm.
What can I be for you? Like, what do you need from me at this stage in your life, without
Well,
my point of view?
you once said that the greatest, I think I did a podcast interview with you, and you said that what's the greatest capacity to have when you do symphony sessions? And you said the willingness to be vulnerable, like the willingness to be vulnerable. And I wanted to ask you now, what's the most unexpected or surprising thing that you've changed using the symphony energies, using being willing to be vulnerable?
Oh my God, what have I changed? Well, yeah, a lot. I was very, 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 very insecure about a lot of things, and ugh, I'm gonna cry here. Um,
Hmm.
I thought I was stupid most of my life, because I was pretty much told that I was never really on par academically with things, and I would always be pulled out of normal classrooms and go in these special ed rooms and stuff. And so I was like labeled with ADD and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I actually started, I would hear Gary Douglas say, hey, these are capacities and blah, blah, blah. But it didn't really sink in until I started doing sessions, doing the Symphony of Possibility sessions. And it's not to say that you have to be someone who's autistic or have ADD or ADHD to be able to do Symphony of Possibility sessions. But what happened, what would occur during the session, and I didn't know, it just sort of happened, was like the ADD, like I'd be aware of everything all
Hmm.
at once,
Hmm.
able to use these energies as information as to what was going on with the person I was working with. So I was able to formulate questions either silently to myself during the session that would create a change in their world, or if I found, like, if I was discovering that they maybe weren't really receiving and allowing the energies in, I would just be able to lean over and just ask them a simple question. Like, I don't know what it would be. It just depends on the person. But that was all based on the ADD, like being aware of all these different things. And somehow I was able to like formulate it into awareness, which is what it was, as to what was going on with what me and the individual were creating together energetically through these sessions. So I started to actually acknowledge the brilliance of me in
Hmm.
that space, because I'll even still to say I'm not an intellectual, by no means. But when I'm in that space, I actually feel like a genius. I've never said that before. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is just my confidence in me. And like, wow, so what would it take to be like this always? In every aspect of my life. But I've just decided that it was separate. And I'm slowly getting over that.
That's amazing. I've never heard you tell it that way before. Thank you.
I've never said it that way before. And it's like, and just acknowledging me for once, because I'm always putting myself down. I still do it, but not like I used to.
Well, so one thing that somebody was asking in the chat was, they were talking about ASB, and a lot of people who've been on here may hear about ESB, which is what Dane does in his sessions, energetic synthesis of being. And then we have, how would you spell out ASB, which is what you were doing?
And my name, Anthony Synthesis of Being. So it was just what Dane affectionately called the SOP sessions that I did. He just named him after my name, Anthony Synthesis of Being. And he talked about it. He's like, look, if I was to call your sessions ESB, energetic synthesis, and then everybody would expect you to do the sessions like me. He's like, but we're different. He's like, I'm me, you're you. So he's like, you call it ASB. And so we ran with that for a while. So, and it was cool.
And now we have Symphony, which is a name that can include everything in a symphony, which is brilliant. So
totally brilliant.
So would you say that the ESB, the ASB, and the symphony is the same thing? Are they different things? How would you explain to somebody wondering?
Well, it's all part of the same universe. It's all part of the same universe. But it's like when you go to a symphony, like a musical, right? Symphony, and are all the instruments the same? No, they're all very different. But together they make this wonderful symphony. So that's how, and that's basically how Dane came up with the Symphony of Possibilities. And then the advanced class is Maestro, right? But when he refers to Maestro, it means teacher, but it's just an advanced version of all of it. And but it is very much like music and the acoustics of the music, and each instrument has its own special contribution. And that's what we're saying. That's why all of you out there are part of the symphony, because you all have your own unique sound, vibrations, frequencies. That in and of itself is what the difference is in the contribution.
And when you come, you bring that to the symphony, which is also so beautiful. And it's not like you're replaceable. You are a very unique frequency, a very unique vibration in that. If you're here and you've never heard about the symphony before, you can actually find out much more on accessconsciousness.com/symphony, which is like a little mini page that has a lot of information about what the symphony is, where it came from, also about Anthony's classes, about Dane's classes, and about introducing the symphony classes. So one of the best ways to find out what the symphony is really to come to an introductory class and explore. And so my final question really is to you, Anthony. So what was it like the first time you experienced this energy, ESP or SOP, whatever we call it, symphony energy or ESP energy? What was it like for you?
It was life-changing. It was completely life-changing. Well, I had what I call my two first times. The first time was back in the day when we had DVDs and stuff. I just watched a DVD of an older class. And I invited a friend to come over. I blindfolded her. She laid on the table, and I'm like hovering my hands over her body, and everywhere that my hands were, she was scratching, because I literally wanted to see if this stuff worked, if it was just BS. So that's why I put the blindfold on her, because I didn't want her to know where I was. And it was amazing, because everywhere I ended up being, like I said, she was either moving something or scratching, which that's not an outcome you require to know if you're doing it right or anything like that. But that was something that I thought I needed at that time.
Very scientific of you.
But fast forward to my first in-person or live class in London, and I'll never forget it till this day. And by the way, that was 2014, November. So we're talking almost 10 years ago. I actually received a session from Dane, and my partner actually had no use of his arms or his legs. The only thing he could move on his body was like his head and maybe a little bit his torso. And all I know is I walked out of there and I felt like everything got stripped away from me. I cried the whole weekend, but everything had gotten, I was shaking for a good 8 weeks. And like, talk about feeling raw and being in that space of vulnerability. And then I remember Dane saying, like, what we're trying to get you to access is like being out in the sea, like the sea of infinite possibilities where there's no land in sight, there's no floating log going by, but that's the space you want to be so you can start asking questions about what else is truly possible for my life and living. And I remember being like, okay, I'm going to be comfortable being uncomfortable. But I was literally shaking for 8 weeks. And in that space, I remember facilitating a foundation class. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I feel like I'm having a panic attack. But it was just excitement from a very raw space. I had a friend of mine come up to me. I thought I did a lousy job. But literally 3 months later, he's like, I was thinking about ending my life. Or I was looking at like what my life insurance was worth. And I was like, I would be worth more to my family dead than I would be alive. And it was something that he actually considered. And he's like, you changed my life. And I was like, whoa. And I know it's because of the space I had got to and accessed from my first in-person SOP class.
Wow. That's amazing also to have with you as a platform to leap off continuously. And I think that's one of the things you mentioned in the beginning was how, one of the things that stop us is doubt. And I would say that really, I agree with you. One of the things that the symphony continues to give me is trust. Trust in the universe, trust in me, trust in possibilities that I can't fathom with my cognitive mind.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And if any of you who are listening to this are interested in the symphony, there are a lot of classes coming up in Europe. There are classes coming up in the Middle East. And so if you're interested, go to accessconsciousness.com/symphony. I know Anthony's on his way to Prague in the Czech Republic, and we have also a class in Dubai, Emirates, and we have a symphony class in Berlin coming up. And all of those have prereqs, but there are also all these introducing the symphony classes that you can come to if you're taking a foundation. So there's so many possibilities to play with these energies and see if they are something that you've been looking for and maybe not even knowing. Do you want to add something, Anthony, before we end?
No, I think that was really beautiful. And yes, it's always a springboard into something greater, a platform. I love that. So true.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.